Hello, everybody. We were talking about my favorite topics, AI and blockchain. I'm going to scoot so I can see you guys a little bit. And I am surrounded by probably the smartest people in the Midwest on this topic. So let's go around and let's just get you guys all introduced. Minta, do you want to start with introductions? Tell us about yourself, your career background, and the company you're currently working with.
Absolutely. So I'm Minta Karlsson. I am head of customer success and lead AI artist at Scenario, which generates game assets and works with different game companies to build a fully supported API workflow for image generation. My background, I was a founder before of a very small company, and I've also worked in design for a very long time. I'm also a bit of a legacy person, not a huge person in gaming, but my dad worked in gaming, so he worked for Atari, and my job is surprisingly similar to his job at that time. So yeah, that's me.
I'm James Meeks, co-CEO and co-founder of Web.ai. I'm a serial entrepreneur who lives on the other side of the lake in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so it's fun to be here with you guys in Chicago. Web.ai, what we like to say is, before you can solve problems with AI, you have to solve the problem of AI. And we are trying to create a platform that will make AI both accessible and usable in a way where the unit economics will ultimately wash, which is a concern that we have with some of the other different approaches in the large language models that you see today. So excited to talk more about that and where blockchain plays into it.
My name's Matt Lewis, and my background's actually in astrophysics. I did that for a while, and then worked in the defense industry, primarily in the field of electronic warfare. So trying to use machine learning techniques to, intercept foreign communications and protect our own communications. And then I also did a lot of machine learning for environmental applications in the last 5 to 10 years. And now I'm the CTO of a company called TestMachine, and we're using a variety of machine learning and artificial intelligence approaches to secure smart contracts on the blockchain.
So like I said, definitely surrounded by very, very smart people up here. So we're gonna dive into all of these companies individually here in a second. But before we do, maybe a little bit of fun. Minta, and for the rest of the panel, can you share a little bit about how you fell down the AI rabbit hole, so to speak?
Sure. So I was actually sort of pivoting out of my own company. It was a small, local company to where I was living in Portland, Maine, last summer, and there's a huge Gen AI boom last summer for images. But just beforehand, they weren't very impressive yet, but it was just something to do. It was exciting. I loved it. And as I started to play with it more and more open source tools came out. So it started with Midjourney, DALL-E, where really you just were beholden to the company in terms of the style, et cetera. And then suddenly we had Stable Diffusion and all of these open source programs to train it yourself and design it yourself. And I was so fascinated by that. I opened my first Colab notebook ever, and I used a lot of community resources to figure out how to train these models, and really taught myself how to make models that were based on my own art or art that I wanted to create. And it was really exciting, and that's what we do now.
Jim, how about you?
I came down the AI rabbit hole in 2019 before it was so talked about today. I always say my favorite graph is it says number of times AI was mentioned on an S&P 500 earnings call, and it goes like this in 2015, 19, and then you've had this exponential spike. So we started in 2019 when it was a little less popular, but was very, very keen to understand how this technology, which I thought then, and I think more now, is going to be transformative, was going to be adopted into the tech world, and then how it was going to live with the business model that we had seen over a Web2 approach over the last 20 years with the introduction of AI, which is going to make everything 10 times more productive. Is it going to ensconce the old Web2 business model, or is it going to unleash a new approach? And that was something that I was very passionate about, and we've been working on ever since.
Matt?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to go back a little bit farther than you guys. In 1989, I wrote my first neural network in AppleSoft BASIC, which is running on an Apple IIe. Not very quickly. It didn't have a whole lot of capability, but that's where I started. And even though I took a detour into physics, I'd always been using artificial intelligence in some way or form to solve real-world problems, whether it was finding invasive species using drone technology, shooting lasers into space and trying to measure the weather. There's always been a compelling use case for me to take these various technologies, whether it's a neural network or decision trees or something like this, and try to extract some value from the problems that are all around us.
I love the different entry points into AI. I'll share mine since I forgot to introduce myself. Hey everybody, I'm your panel host for the day, but I'm Stef Caldwell, and my entry point to AI, I was working at a market research firm here in Chicago called Spins that operates in the consumer sector. And we had these incredible analytics applications that visualize data in bar charts and line charts and all that good stuff. I was a fresh grad out of college, struggling to translate all this data for myself, and I just thought, shouldn't a computer be able to do this? And lo and behold, there was this really incredible, innovative company in Chicago called Narrative Science that was dealing with this exact problem. How do you take structured data, translate into intuitive, easy to read, plain narrative text, and scale that to businesses like Wells Fargo and PayPal and Stripe and name your kind of either financial services organization, consumer organization, enterprise organization, et cetera. And I fell in love with using computers to solve problems I didn't want to solve as a human, which brings me to my angle on artificial intelligence, which is how does this actually solve business problems? Who does this technology actually help? And we're so lucky that Minta represents the business side of this equation in today's panel. So Minta, gaming is a really creative space. It's no surprise it's one of the first industries to really catalyze the use of Gen AI to scale consistent creative assets. I love that your lens is from a customer success angle. So as somebody who's led customer success for an AI company, albeit in a different sector, understanding what our customers were trying to accomplish with our software during onboarding and then collaborating around successful rollouts was always really important to us. And it always had its unique challenges. So from your perspective, what's been your experience deploying this new technology in this sector? And what are some of the challenges that your customers are trying to solve when they come to your company for support?
Yeah, so I think the game industry is a really fascinating industry to look at when we're talking about art and AI, and it really reflects a lot of different art industries. One thing that I don't know if everyone's aware of, art takes up about 40 to 60% of every game budget. There's a lot of money going into art. And I've worked as a professional artist, a commercial artist, so certainly I support the idea that we want real artists, we want artists continuing to work in these spaces. When people talk about commercial art and they talk about art and AI, we hear concerns about, well, who is this replacing? And our customers also ask those questions. They ask, how is this impacting? What I think a lot of people miss is the wasted time and the busy work that takes place in a commercial art space, regardless of whether it's game art or otherwise. I have anecdotes from colleagues and also from users of spending 40 to 60 hours of an employee's time finding a stock image. This is not an image that that employee is going to be making. This is an image that they're going to be using and adjusting. And that is a common story. Most artists in commercial art, and game art is no exception, are super overworked. And they communicate about that a lot. And they're overworked not on the things they enjoy, which is creating new ideas. They're overworked on the small details that we can automate, and AI is very, very good at. So when we're talking about onboarding customers and how to make them successful, I always say put it in the hands of the artist, because we get the best results from artists using the tools, because their understanding of what the AI needs to learn, style, concepts, the difference between objects and style is so important to a successful model.
I feel like I can really resonate with that. When we were deploying these AI models at the various enterprises we were working with, a lot of our use case was not around art generation, but narrative generation. And so we were talking about a whole team of financial analysts that love doing the work of munging the numbers and then putting them into a Mad Libs format. And for the companies that looked at our technology, it was both about how do we scale and make this more efficient for the employees of the organization, but also how does this actually become a culture, like enabler for them? How does it make everybody's work life a little bit better because they're not doing the work that they don't want to do?
I mean, I often say that when I'm working with different users who are onboarding, I know if I'm working with someone on the art team, I can teach them how to use the program in less than 20 minutes. And they can probably figure out how to use it on their own otherwise. If I'm working with someone outside of the art team, it might take a couple days for them to really understand the type of data that they need to give a program. So we are designing tools for artists, and I think that's super exciting, and I think artists have a lot of fun with it.
Thank you so much for walking us through that. Jim, you and I had the opportunity to catch up just briefly ahead of time. We bonded over the fact that we both love Michigan, so love that for us. But we also bonded over artificial intelligence, my journey into the space as well as yours. Web AI is delivering proprietary flagship architectures in a no-code development platform, which provides developers and enterprises the ability to curate, train, and deploy state-of-the-art models. For those in the audience that are maybe just starting to wrap their arms around artificial intelligence, can you explain first the limitations of the current compute-intensive approach to AI, things like LLM and terms of today, as well as how new AI architectures like what your company is deploying and utilizing blockchain principles helps overcome these challenges?
Yeah, but happy to. So one thing I'll take a quick step back is what is AI good for? And you're just talking about, are people worried about the replacing jobs, et cetera? My argument is I think AI will do jobs that we don't even have enough humans to do right now. And so we can now automate processes that businesses would love to have in operation, but there's just not enough people to do it. And so one example would be, let's say we do visual AI. We're working with a school in Houston, Texas to identify if someone pulls out a weapon on the way to school. Now, there's just not enough security guards in the country to be watching every minute of footage of every security camera at every school, but that's something that AI could do. Another thing that we're working on is pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is unusual because it's small, so it's a really small data set. 45,000 people die of it a year. Well, if it's small, that means the average radiologist maybe hasn't had enough pattern recognition to identify it. So if you have pancreatic cancer and you're in New York City and you go to NYU Langone, or if you're in Baltimore and you go to Johns Hopkins, you're in luck because those guys are experts. But if you're in New Buffalo, Michigan, the chances are that radiologist has never seen it before. So can we take a model of how the folks at NYU or Johns Hopkins look at pancreatic cancer, and then can we automate it? And now can every MRI in the country, if not the world, be looking for a quick screen of pancreatic cancer? So AI is going to open up use cases that we can't even imagine, in our opinion. And for that reason, we decided at Web AI to build a platform, not end use cases. So we don't want to be in the business of picking all the different things that can be built. We want our customers to be able to do it. So then you have to have a workflow that is really easy to use. And so you have to be able to make models very, very quickly. And that's some of the things that ChatGPT and Midjourney have done well, is they've put AI into the hands of producers that can really be creative about it. And so that's wonderful. So if we go to I was just talking to a major supermarket retailer 2 days ago, and he said, look, I would like to make sure that people aren't stealing. So I need loss prevention at the checkout. I would also like to know how long a customer is looking at a particular aisle to see whether they're going to get the Cheerios or the Frosted Mini Wheats. I also would like to know, are all the people in my warehouse, are they wearing the protective vest? I would also like to know, did the box come in damaged into my warehouse facility, and who's responsible for that? I would also like to know the Snickers bar, when it comes from the big package, goes to a smaller package, puts on shelf, was it done at the right time? There's just not enough humans to give you all that information. That is super valuable data. And so rather than having all of these point solutions and having 20 different vendors creating 20 different AI solutions for each of those points, we say, no, we're going to give you the platform, and if we make it easy enough, your business team can dream up what are the things that you want to track and what's the information that you want to gain from it. The problem right now, however, is that the way that AI has been built in the large language model and the generative AI approach is it is massively compute intensive. And right now, if you guys are using ChatGPT, thank Microsoft for subsidizing your experience, because they are burning $700,000 a day on all the cool queries that you guys are doing. That's great. But when is that going to run out? At what point will the unit economics of this thing actually work? And then you could say, well, okay, well, I want to have my own computer because I don't really trust having this out in Microsoft Azure because my data is leaking everywhere. Okay, you can have your own computer, and even if you're one of the leading banks that I just talked to yesterday, you're number 12 in line for NVIDIA to give you a GPU. Because guess what? There's one company that's making the GPUs on which all of these AI is running, and there's a massive shortage. So there's this potential of AI, which is really extraordinary, but we're hitting the ceilings really quickly. Who owns the data? If I use ChatGPT, is the output really mine? Is it OpenAI's? Is it Getty Images that OpenAI took from? All these questions are coming out right now. We believe that the block can provide some of the solutions to that, and think that if AI is going to reach its full potential, which we think is unlimited, it's going to have to get these structural questions done right, and it's going to have to do it quickly because the space is just moving extraordinarily fast.
So what I'm hearing is you've seen two really big issues in the market. One is that there's a bottleneck in terms of the providers of applications like ChatGPT that allow consumers to leverage these models at scale. Second is there's a bottleneck with the provider of the compute power to be able to do those things. How does Web AI turn this on its head? Can you explain a little bit more about your guys' solution, how it's novel, and why that wouldn't have happened if you guys were out of Silicon Valley, and why it had to happen here in the Midwest or elsewhere?
It had to happen in the Midwest because we're the best. So when my co-founder was studying at Stanford, it's really, I think, engineers, it's important to understand their psychology because they're making 100,000 decisions a day. So understanding where they come from is important. And my co-founder, David Stout, he was mining Bitcoin in 2014, back when colleges weren't smart enough to say, you can't use my electricity for that. So he gets to drive a fancy car because he was able to do it. But he was thinking about blockchain in a way that it informed, it kind of framed the way in which he looked at the world, looked at compute. And then he goes out to Stanford. And all the professors at Stanford are going to come from Google Brain or Meta or whatnot. And how are they going to think about it? They're going to say, data is great. I have all of it. Google knows everything you've searched. Facebook knows everything you've liked. Amazon knows everything you've said to your spouse if it was in front of Alexa. So I've got all this data that's amazing. And I built this incredible compute for it to process all the data. QED, the solution has to be more data, more compute. And that is the entire genesis of the LLM movement that we see today. Incredibly productive, but it is a brute force solution that's going to run out of gas. So David Stout was looking at this and says, wait a minute, why don't you make things really thin rather than large, get down to a neural net layer that the AI can figure out what it needs to focus on that time. Then I don't need all this compute. Now I can run on CPU, of which there are many more, than GPU. And so this idea of how do I make things small, thin, and distributed versus monolithic, heavy, and compute-centric, it's just a different mindset, and it's a different way of looking at AI, one that we feel can provide the solution that these ceilings that we're hitting everywhere else are going to run into.
I'm so excited to see how this company and this technology gets deployed across all the different use cases. We were just scratching the surface earlier in a conversation about the types of sectors that they work in, but it's finance, it's healthcare, it's government, it's consumer, it touches everything. The applications are endless. I shared a little bit about my journey down the the AI rabbit hole. My journey down the Web3 rabbit hole, the blockchain rabbit hole, the smart contracts rabbit hole happened at the same AI company, Narrative Science in Chicago. I'm sitting with the solutions engineer one day, and he tells me that he's made a ton of money with this thing called Bitcoin. And I'm like, what? Tell me more. I need to know about this. And he pointed me to a book called The Blockchain Revolution, which at the time, this is 2016, 2017 era, addressed the cryptocurrencies that were hot at that time in the market. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin. And I remember reading this book, learning about Ethereum and learning about the power of smart contracts and thinking, how could this change the world? How could this technology combined with artificial intelligence technology become something really, really important to what was going to happen in my lifetime with respect to innovation? Matt, you sit at the intersection of these technologies. At TestMachine, you've approached this problem of delivering real-time smart contract auditing by marrying two of my favorite technologies, AI and blockchain. Can you share more about what you believe the power is of blockchain and AI technology, both for your customers, but also just more broadly speaking?
So, we heard earlier that the point of blockchain is to sort of disintermediate, the big players who are extracting more value than they're delivering. And I think blockchain is doing that almost across the board, but there are a few pain points that are still getting in the way of wider adoption. And from our perspective, the biggest one right now is security. I mean, we call them smart contracts, but they're really only as smart as the person who wrote them. In the last year, I think $2.4 billion have been stolen out of smart contracts, just because there are security flaws that are built into them that a lot of them are known, but some of them are unknown. And there are large auditing firms that charge exorbitant fees to audit these contracts, and they don't provide any guarantees that they found all of the flaws, and so they get hacked, even after a 6-month review. And I think part of the problem is there's not enough people. There's not enough Solidity developers in the world to properly audit these contracts. There's something like 6 million Ethereum contracts deployed right now. There's billions of lines of code out there, and there's going to be tons of flaws. So artificial intelligence, I think, is really complementary to blockchain in that sense. It can scale in ways that humans can't, and it can provide a way to get these large, the whole point of the blockchain is that nobody's in charge. But if you got to go to Deloitte and get your contract audited, then why not just have a bank?
Right.
It's got to go through there. So I think so the technology that we're building, we're taking a sort of a multi-pronged approach to it. So we're using large language models for part of it, but the large language models, they're big, they're monolithic. They're really nothing more than a big conditional probability distribution. So it's like, here's a word, what's the next probable word, given the last 15 words that I have spit out. That's all it's doing. It's just so large, and it's been trained on everything that's ever been written. But it's still just probabilistically grabbing stuff. And if you want to build a security platform around that, at this point in time, good luck, because you can take a smart contract and throw it into GPT-4, and you'll get something out. And you can throw the same one in there again, and you'll get something slightly different out. Maybe it missed these 4 things. So there's a lot of power there, but the approach we've taken is we have collected a bunch of people who have a lot of really deep domain expertise in blockchain and how to write Solidity and how to audit contracts. And we just put them in a room and we try to extract all that domain knowledge, build it into a large language model. But then we also use more conventional machine learning approaches, that are more robust, that are well understood from a mathematical perspective. So we can take the contract, for example. We can take a contract that's just a bunch of code. We can represent it as a graph, and then once we have that graph, we can then represent that graph as a vector in a latent vector space. And now all of the contracts that exhibit certain vulnerabilities live over in this corner of some high dimensional space, and all of the contracts that are free of vulnerabilities live over here. And so that's another data point that we can leverage, and we can still use the large language models to help generate actionable feedback for developers on how to fix these problems. So I think right now it's bringing together humans, extracting the domain expertise, and then putting it together with 4 or 5 of these machine learning approaches. That is where we are right now. I mean, we don't have this artificial general intelligence yet that might allow a large language model to completely accurately audit your contract. But having people work with artificial intelligence, I think, for the next decade is really where this is going.
Right now, when I think smart contracts, from my consumer lens in the crypto space, I think primarily NFTs, being able to exchange these things, being able to transact with no real third parties, though I'm using CoinWallet, so that's arguable, to be able to exchange. As this technology scales, as more and more sectors adopt it, what do you foresee as like the future of use cases where your technology would be most applied?
Well, I think there's going to be a change in the way organizations govern themselves. There's going to be these DAOs, these decentralized finance is already huge, and so I think that's where artificial intelligence is going to work with the blockchain. So the blockchain tells you what is valid, and it's always going. That's what its job is always going to be. But you need to be able to interact with it in a profitable way at scale, and I think that's where artificial intelligence is going to have the biggest impact. Digital identity verification, that can be done, using a number of artificial intelligence approaches. But I think in the short term, security is going to be where artificial intelligence plays the biggest role in the blockchain space, because it's always going to be riding beside, at least for now, it's going to be riding beside the blockchain. It's not going to be on the blockchain, except certain data components. But you don't want to run a neural network on a blockchain node right now. Don't do that. Expensive.
So there's a lot of jobs that people can have in this world that are far more simple than the jobs that you guys have given yourselves. We could be making, I don't know, bracelets and selling them on Etsy. That would be a career. I imagine that you're in the careers that you are because you really care about this technology, the application of it, and building towards a future where we can do a lot more because of artificial intelligence, blockchain, all the technologies that we covered. I'd love to hear from you guys as we wrap up this panel. If AI is the technology of the moment, and we collectively on this panel believe in the staying power, either within your organization or outside of your organization, what are the use cases and the applications of AI that you guys get really jazzed about, that you think can either solve major problems that we have in this world or just be really fun ways to leverage technology in novel new ways? Minta, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've experienced and I've seen, and it's not so much about like a way of using AI that is considered necessarily like blockchain specific or solving a problem that I think we can like pin to anything in particular. It's more so with image creation. I think it gives people an opportunity who maybe don't consider themselves artistic, who struggle to find ways to express themselves creatively. It gives them an outlet, finally, to communicate ideas in a way that feels genuine to their experience. And we've seen that. We've seen that in our own company in terms of conversations happening between creative teams and non-creative teams in companies. Oftentimes, there's actually a lot of breakdown of communication between creative teams and the rest of the company because we're trying to explain concepts with words that can't be explained with words. That happens all the time. That's actually a huge time waste in a lot of companies, is just trying to explain what someone's thinking of. You can't. Like, I can't describe to you, I'm imagining a dog right now. I can't describe to you truly what that dog looks like. I can describe to you generally what that dog looks like. And we find that this isn't just useful in a sort of business lens. This is useful in a human experience lens. We crave to be heard and understood as human beings. And being able to have an outlet that you can fine-tune closer and closer to what you actually see in your mind, and then put that in front of another person, that's a really powerful experience. Even if that other person is just you, being able to make it and look at it and say, I experienced this, and now it's here, and I can reflect back on it. So that for me is exciting. It's why I got into it originally, and I think it can potentially really like save aspects of humanity.
Jim or Matt, who wants to follow up on that?
I'll jump on that because I completely agree, and maybe after this I will show you a drawing I could make, and it's however, I have wonderful art that is framed and hanging on my wall that I generated using these stable diffusion algorithms at my kitchen table. That I would not have. And it's a sequence of 16 pictures of people looking at distant nuclear explosions. It's been controversial in the household, but hit me up afterwards, yeah. But the point is, I would never have access to that. I would never be able to do that, and just because I have never tried to draw anything. But I think it goes beyond that because also, I have kids who are now writing like Python programs using things like ChatGPT, and they don't necessarily even have the ability yet to understand how arrays work and how math works and floating point operations and whatnot. But they're generating things creatively. That there's this sort of this democratization of ability that comes with artificial intelligence. And it's not just like these creative urges. There's also going to be a lot of around like helping people walk again, or helping people see, or helping people be able to pick things up when they have nerve damage. So I think it's really going to be a democratizing influence in terms of bringing creativity and more ability to everybody.
Jim, sorry, you have to go last on this one.
No, I agree with this, and I love the two examples about the generative AI. I think the question is going to, I'm going to start with my premise, which is this is the most productive technology that we've seen in 100 years. And And so productivity is great because that's what should drive down prices and create a lot of value. But if that's, let's say that hypothesis is true, then the next question is who owns it? And that's going to drive everything. And so you have two scenarios. Either humans work for the technology or the technology work for humans. The problem that I have with the Web 2 model is that you really go towards the humans are working for the technology. You know, if we were out here and we saw a bunch of kids or adults scrolling through TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, I'm saying, wow, you guys are child labor because you're making them a ton of money and you're not getting paid anything for it. So we live in that world of Web 2. And I think if we keep on going down the large language model, there's going to be a question of, okay, I just used this great tool, it's really useful for me, but was it using me in turn? And was I actually capturing the value of it? Where I think Web 3 comes into it is you can create an ownership where it says, no, I own this AI. I own the data that went into it. I own the model. I can trade it to you. If you like that model, you can trade it back to me. And it's going to be on a computer that I own that doesn't have to be connected to the cloud. So two visions of a smart home. Let's say AI, you've got cameras everywhere, and I want to know, did my newborn baby roll over on its stomach? Send me an alert. I want to know, what's the inventory value of all of the equipment in my house? Give me a dollar amount for it. I want to know when someone came up to my door that shouldn't have and stole my Amazon box. Let's just say the use cases, everything you know is infinite. Two scenarios. One, that could be a Google Nest or it could be Amazon Alexa, and we're just going to have to trust that those people are taking my personal information and treating it fairly. Or you could say, no, it's on a computer in my basement. If I don't want anyone to know it, I'm going to put a drill bit in that thing and all of my data is gone because I own it and no one can manipulate that. And so I think the advantage of Web3 is we've got a chance to take this super productive technology that can do things that all of us in this room cannot even dream of and make sure that it is going back to the old traditional notion of property rights where it's owned by the end user, whether that's a corporation or an individual. And I think that the rails of Block can help provide a path to that as different than a massive LLM in a cloud owned by one of the 4 biggest tech companies in the world.
Wow, you guys, thank you so much for these incredible insights. This panel, hopefully you guys are all walking away with new ideas, new applications for this technology and what it means for the future. Thanks again. I was hoping we'd have time for questions, but I think our time is up, so thank you all.